Hello again, everybody. I'm Ben Parker with the Box Score Network, joined by Simon Shortt, who is usually your main host for a lot of these events that we do on the YouTube channel. But tonight we're switching it up a little bit. Some of you may have already seen our first show in which me and Simon talked about all the jobs that might open up and ones we thought were safe in the NFL. If you haven't, go back and check that one out, and we'll give you some of our reasoning about why we thought a guy would be safe or shouldn't be safe, depending on how we felt about different teams. Simon, we are now ready to talk about some specific candidates, how we feel about them overall, and then pair off some of them to some of these teams a little bit. So, how you doing tonight, and how you feeling about this particular subject?
I'm doing great. I love doing this. We did our first real deep dive into this last year, and I think it's a ton of fun. I think it's so fun to try and figure out who the next really good coaches are, and even just who the league thinks are the next really good coaches. Really kind of figure out what's actually being discussed behind closed doors, and for us to try and create these lists of names and pare them down a little bit, and then get to compare once interviews start happening is a really just fun exercise, fun thing for us to talk about. So I love doing this. I can't wait to be completely wrong in 2 months, but you know what? It's a good time while we're here.
See, there's no way you and I can be completely wrong because our opinion is the one that counts. If NFL teams get it wrong, that's on them. We're giving them every chance here. We're 2 months ahead on this. We're giving them every chance to hear it from us on what they should do. If they mess it up, that's really just on their franchise's part. Okay.
See, and we can really blame Bill Belichick for doing this because we did not start these real conversations this early last year. I went back. You and I did our videos on this 10 months ago, so not quite a full year. And nobody else was doing pods a full year ago to this date about coaching carousels. But because Bill Belichick had to do his stupid decision now, we have to talk about it 2 months early. And I don't feel like I'm quite ready, but that's part of what makes it fun. So screw you, Bill Belichick, one more time on
You
your
know what
way out the
irritates
door.
me
Appreciate
most
it.
about that is I was listening to Bill. I enjoy listening to Bill and Peyton on
Oh
these
yeah,
Monday night
you're
broadcasts.
bummed.
Not missing half the team here, man. I'm Peyton does a good job, but
That this is how insane that guy is, and I promise this won't just be a Bill Belichick bot. But the guy was so bored going from working 80 hours a week as a coach to 65 hours a week doing a million different media jobs that he now needs to work 90
yeah,
hours a week as a college
yeah,
football head coach.
yeah.
What a what a ridiculous person, man. Go buy an island, dude. Go away. But
We're gonna
anyways, coaching
we're
candidate.
gonna get, I promise, to about 7 teams we're gonna focus on tonight whose jobs we legit think probably are gonna be open, or it's at least in the realm of possibility that they're gonna be open. But before we do that, I'm gonna start off with your list of candidates, the Simon's list of candidates that you think are in that kind of top pool, however large you want to define that. And we'll start working off of that.
All right, so let me start. Let me kind of work my way up to the guys that I think are really going to end up getting new jobs. So just a long list of guys that I kind of considered, right? That just kind of floated in my mind first. So these guys made my initial notes page, not even the notes I'm actually working off of. So Frank Smith in Miami, offensive coordinator, a guy whose name gets brought up a couple times. Anthony Weaver, the defensive coordinator for the Miami Dolphins as well. Those are both a couple names from Miami that you could look at. Um, Couple other coordinator pairings, Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore. I should probably take Kellen Moore a little bit more seriously, but pairing those two guys together for what they did in Philly this year. Leslie Frazier in Seattle kind of came back this year as a consultant slash assistant head coach. So I could see his name being brought up by a couple teams again. Vance Joseph in Denver for the work he's doing this year, I think is a name that might get an interview or two. Cliff Kingsbury and Arthur Smith as like retread OCs that are having good offensive seasons this year, I'm sure will get brought up. And Jesse Minter, the Chargers' young defensive coordinator, is another name that I think will get mentioned, and he'll probably get a couple of those interviews that are more just teams learning a little bit about him since he's I forget if he's been in the NFL before, but back new to the NFL for this season, coming up from college with Harbaugh. So those are all some like cursory names that I think will get mentioned. Some names that I think will be a little more seriously taken that won't end up getting jobs. I think Liam Cohen, the OC in or actually, did you want to talk about any of those really long list guys before I move on?
The only note I'll make is that it's good for these guys to be getting these interviews and this exposure, but it also kind of sucks because in a lot of cases you get your hopes up a little bit, you think about what if, and then you kind of know I'm really not got much of a shot at it this year, maybe 2, 3 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple guys that I think will get a few interviews. Liam Cohen, Tampa Bay OC is one. He's one that I actually heard on the Athletic Football Show that I referenced earlier. Maybe it's like a little like Todd Bowles and Bruce Arians, where it's like in a year or two, if Todd Bowles is ready to hang it up, like Liam Cohen, they kind of handed him. He's been back in the NFL for 1 year. He spent some time bouncing between college and the Rams, so maybe just ultimately not a guy who's ready to be an NFL head coach yet, but is impressed with his offense like a year after Dave Canales did the same thing. So he's a guy that I think ultimately won't get a job, but is going to be interesting and brought up. Drew Petzing with Arizona, I think is going to be one of is like the Ben Johnson understudy. Like if a team just like really has their heart set on Ben Johnson and doesn't get him, like Drew Petzing is going to be the next guy kind of in that mold of offensive play designer who does really good things both in the run and pass game, and you just get the guy in and let him figure out how to be a coach, a head coach overall around that. Um, I did write Vic Fangio actually on the shorter list here, so I think especially if they have a really strong end of the year, he's one that will, as the architect of this modern defense, anyways, and he had a resurgent defensive coordinator season. I think he's one that will probably get a couple more interviews. How about the offensive tandem in Minnesota, Wes Phillips and Josh McCown? I don't think either are really considered to be like the architect of the offense or the same like soft skills that Kevin O'Connell has, but working in that offense, Wes Phillips being a guy who's been with the Rams and McVay, McCown, a guy who's already interviewed for head coaching jobs. I think both those guys will be considered. Maybe more ultimately, they become a true OC and play caller next year, but guys that I think will get interviews for head coaching jobs. Um, Todd Monken with Baltimore, it's a little strange. You don't usually get an older OC that's really involved in these decisions. But I mean, the last one that did
Yeah.
that was Bruce Arians, and guess what? He was pretty good once he finally got his shot. So maybe Monken gets a chance here. I'll actually bring him up a little bit later, I think. Um, Here's a name I haven't heard anything about this year, and this is my last on my like long list before we get to the real consideration names. Pete Carroll. Where the heck is Pete Carroll? What is he doing? We're not talking about him at all. I haven't heard from him.
No,
I looked,
nothing.
Googled him the last couple days, and it's just speculation about like if Belichick went to college, why can't Pete Carroll? But nothing actually from him or what he's doing. The only thing I have seen or heard was somebody. I think somebody was on the Kay Adams show that one. I think it's is it Yahoo draft whoever she's with. Was like, I've talked to Pete Carroll recently, and he still has like the fire to coach because he's still coaching people in like other non-football related things. Like this, how to be a good husband and dad. Like he's just talking to people on the phone. So like, there's still some fire in there, which I don't think we ever thought was going to leave Pete Carroll. But I haven't
Right.
seen anything about him actually coach anywhere. So I don't know what's going on with Pete Carroll. Those are my names with an asterisk on Carroll that are like these will be the guys I think really in consideration that just don't ultimately get one this year. Maybe one more year for these guys, especially like Petzing and Cohen as young OCs.
It's a long list, and listen, none of us know for sure how a guy is going to do. We've all got an opinion. We've seen a little bit of his work. We've got a feel for who he is as a person. You never know, man. Some of these guys, you're just taking complete kind of shots in the dark, even though you think, hey, I like this guy. He's going to be good. You just don't know till you give him your chance. Sometimes, even if he's already had a chance, he's on the second job, you just don't know. But if you at all have a feel for, if you've been in the league and been around this guy at all, and you've got a feel for him, grab him now. Don't wait till next year when he's all of a sudden hot. You're competing with 5 or 6, 7 other teams. If you know you like a guy, take him now while he's still on this second tier list.
And then this is like a little half tier because this is in the event that these guys are fired. I think they're inner circle guys, but I don't ultimately think they will be. That's Kevin Stefanski and Brian Daboll. Stefanski would be a trade scenario more than likely, and Daboll, we talked about in the other video. The vibes are bad in New York, but I think you still want his offensive mind with a young quarterback. So those guys are, I have asterisks on them. If they become available, I think they're inner tier
Yeah.
guys that you want. But here are my main names. I have six names that I think these are the guys that definitely should and probably will be head coaches next year. So if at the very minimum we have six jobs, these are probably the guys getting them. It's Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn from the Detroit Lions. It's Mike Vrabel, who's currently I don't know if he's a consultant or assistant coach or whatever with the Browns. Brian Flores, defensive coordinator with the Vikings. Joe Brady, offensive coordinator with the Bills. And Robert Saleh, recently fired head coach from the New York Jets and offensive consultant with the Packers. He's listed as an offensive consultant from them. I did not know that.
Wow.
I knew he was
Flexing.
helping out the Packers, but I didn't know he was on the other side of the ball. That's pretty interesting. So those are my real six inner circle guys.
It's quite a list. I'm going to say this right off the top. I'm not usually a big retread guy. The NFL has retreaded a lot of guys over the years, and I honestly didn't think half of them deserved it. Just really legit didn't. Their first stop, 3 year, 4 year stop was so bad. I did not think they should have gotten a second shot, to be honest. And they did in a lot of cases. Stop number two was no better. This year's retreads, if you will, I like a whole lot better.
Boy.
Specifically, Flores, Vrabel, and even Carroll. Even though the age thing, maybe how long are you going to keep him? How long is he going to want to coach for? But just
Mhm.
Flores and Vrabel, man, to me, I would trust those guys with a lot of the jobs that I have open. We'll get to them. The coordinator side this year, there's a lot of guys I like, but after Ben Johnson, to me, I'm just not super excited about a lot of them. It's like, man, I'd love to see how they do, but I'm not sure I want to be the organization that gives them their first shot at it, especially when my roster's a little weak. I got issues at quarterback. I got cap issues. I've got an owner who's a real pain in the butt. I mean, do I really want to dip into the coordinator pool unless I'm convinced? So this year's retreads, 2 to 3 of them look a little bit better than the coordinator list, at least from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And when you look at those, retread candidates, it's not retreads because they had like 2 and 3 win seasons, right? I think that's the
Right.
easiest thing to look at. Like Vrabel,
Yes.
very successful years in Tennessee until that last one. Um, Brian Flores, way more wins than he was supposed to get if you believe everything from the complaints made about the ownership, which would not be surprising. And then Robert Saleh. Again, I don't even know if they ever had a winning season under him, but look at what happened to the Jets when he was fired. Like, my goodness, he was holding a lot of stuff together. It's like when a receiver leaves the Steelers and you see what really happens to them when Mike Tomlin isn't there to hold it all together. I think everyone probably looks at Salah in a much different light now than they probably did a few months ago. So, I think those are pretty good retread candidates in terms of how much success they actually have had.
Well, let's work our way through the list. You and I carved out about 13 teams on the last
Hmm.
episode. You and I are going to focus on about seven that we think are legit good chances. Let's start for sure, though, with the three jobs that are already open. Jets, Bears, and Saints. I'll let you pick any one of those three teams. And again, we should have the Ben Johnson conversation real quick first, right?
Sure. Hmm.
Ben Johnson seems to be the name at the top of most people's list. And if he picks a job this year, he seems like he'll kind of have his pick of where he wants to go. That being said, if you're an organization who thinks Ben Johnson isn't coming to us no matter what, they may go ahead and move on to one of these other candidates that we've mentioned, even though Ben Johnson isn't even available to really, talk too much to teams yet. So, where are you feeling on Ben Johnson first, and then take us into the Jets, Bears, or Saints?
Yeah, Ben Johnson's great. I think you're totally right. I think he's the one that everyone's going to have at the top of their list. And it's just about, do you want to try to wait it out and see what happens or not? Because, it's worked out mostly for the Commanders, but the Commanders waited till the zeroth hour for him. Zeroth, that's not a word. But the last
It is
hour for
now.
him, and they got Dan Quinn, who felt like a consolation prize, and it's still kind of TBD how it's all going to work out, but it's obviously started out great. Um, so do you want to be in that position when the candidate pool? I mean, I went through a bunch of names, but like there's no Dan Quinn at spot 10, right? You're gonna get someone that's a little more unproven, probably if you wait all the way to the end of this. So I don't know if it's because I don't feel as good about the jobs. I don't think Ben Johnson feels as slam dunk as he did last year, and that's part of what happens, right, with this world. Like if you
Yeah.
wait 1 or 2 cycles too long, like the shine is off, right? It's not you're not the hot young up and comer anymore. And I still think Ben Johnson is the top candidate and should be because of um his experience with Dan Campbell, his focus on the relationship side, and oh, by the way, his really good freaking offense that he puts together and the way he balances the run and pass, uses the offensive line, uses all of his weapons. Like I think there's still a lot there, but especially because what it seems he's looking for, that like pure 100% organizational alignment, um, plus his the like hyper competitiveness and what he's going to want specifically maybe on the offensive end. I think there's a lot of stipulation, so I don't know that he's going to actually be the best candidate for everybody, but I do think he should be at the top of everyone's list to at least have a conversation with.
Let's go ahead and just start there then, because I talked about the three jobs we know are open. But let's say you're Ben Johnson, because a lot of the conversations are going to wait until he's actually available to take some of these interviews. Jets, Bears, Saints, they're already open. Jaguars and Giants, there's a chance they're open. Cowboys and Raiders, there's a chance both of those jobs are open. If those are the seven jobs, let's assume Cincinnati stays and Ben Johnson can't get to Joe Burrow until next year, maybe not ever. Would he take one of these seven, or does he just sit in Detroit?
Well, on the Detroit side, it depends how the season ends. If they win the Super Bowl, I think he's happy to ride off and find the next thing. If they get so close and miss out, I could see him being a little more motivated to stay once again. I think the top job here, if there's a new GM, is the Jaguars and Trent Baalke for Ben Johnson. You have the quarterback already there. Ownership is like pretty quiet and stable. Um, you have some flexibility with what you could do with the offense. The defense has been good recently, but the GM thing I think is going to be big for Ben Johnson. Now, like I said, he wants pure organizational alignment. I don't know if in his mind that means he picks the GM, he gets hired at the same time as the GM, or he just goes into the interviews and he clicks with whoever the GM is and he has full trust and faith in what's going on. But when I look at those seven jobs, I think the Jaguars have the closest thing to what he's looking for. Um, the Giants and Raiders are like probably close after that, but I don't know how he'll feel about Joe Shane and the organizational alignment between the owner wanting Saquon Barkley back and Shane wanting putting a hard price on him, and then just how everything that went on with Daniel Jones. I don't know if that organizational communication is there. And then for the Raiders, I don't know if Ben Johnson's going to be up for Tom Brady telling him what to do and Mark Davis telling him what to do. And okay, who is the GM? Is it Tom Telesco? Is he staying? Are we also moving on from him? Is Brady effectively the GM? Because more than I expected in the last 2 weeks, insiders have been saying like, oh well, Brady's going to put his stamp on things, and I did not know that maybe that's just naive on my part, but I don't know. I like if Brady really wants to put a stamp on this, what does it look like? And would Ben Johnson be up for that? So I think assuming Balky is gone, that's the job for Ben Johnson, and he gets to either pick or just come in with the GM at the same time. Um, and then if it's not that, man, yeah, I don't know if any of these jobs are really where Ben Johnson's going to want to be.
I tend to agree with a lot of that. And listen, if Tom Brady gets to put his stamp on things and the Raiders, count me naive too. Brady shouldn't be getting to do anything with the Raiders. Brady should go back to the announcing box and just enjoy his little piece of ownership, whatever that is, with the Raiders. That's where that should start and end, unless he wants to go over and commit full time to a job with the Raiders and he's only working with the Raiders. Other than that, we don't need input from Tom, unfortunately. But the Jaguars' job, especially if Trent Baalke isn't there, and maybe he's not. But the ownership in Jacksonville is good to me. I like the ownership there in Jacksonville. It's good support, it's good vibes, it's good energy. You got good connections over in London with the overseas stuff. I like the ownership there. And then you've got a quarterback that at least has potential. I'm sure Ben Johnson looks at Trevor Lawrence and thinks, well, I unlocked a lot of what Jared Goff can do, so I could surely unlock what Trevor Lawrence can do. I feel very confident that Ben would think that. The Raiders thing is more cloudy, and so is the Giants thing with Joe Shane. But those would be my next two stops if I'm Ben Johnson. I kind of get to pick my quarterback probably out of this year's draft.
Right.
So I like those two spots for Ben Johnson. Okay, so for now, let's put the Jaguars and the Raiders and the Giants up there as Ben Johnson's top spots, and let's assume that Ben Johnson is off the board. Let's take it on over to the Chicago Bears because this to me is a solid place to go to. I'm okay with ownership, even though I know Chicago fans are kind of getting wore out on it. I don't think it's as bad as some other places in the NFL, to be honest. Pretty good fan base. You've got some quarterback with potential there with Caleb Williams. Pretty good roster compared to some of these teams that we're looking at. A lot already in house, kind of ready to work with. So, how do you feel about the Bears' job, and who would you want to put there?
If I'm a candidate first, I'm a little wary of the GM situation with Ryan Poles. Now, I think Ryan Poles has made good decisions, but Ryan Poles has already been there for 3 years. It looks like he's gonna last through to see at least be involved in the next coach hiring, right? The first time around, he picked Eberflus, but he wasn't part of the whole process. I think he got in when there was a list of three names I was reading up on today, and he got to make the final decision from there. But if I'm the head coach, I feel like I have to fit into what Poles' vision is. And then if Poles is gone, am I also gone? Do I get to make the decisions moving past him? Like I picked the GM and now it's my decision making? Or do I also just have to vibe with this next GM that comes in? So like I'm wary of that. The timing, he's not so set in stone that I feel like, well, there's security there, and he's not so new that I feel like he and I are in this together. So I'm a little wary of it from that standpoint. But everything else, yeah, feels good. I mean, the defensive roster is there. Obviously, the quarterback is there, and there's some offensive pieces. You look at it and you feel like if I can rebuild this offensive line, which again, Ben Johnson in theory would be great for because he has seen great offensive lines. So if I was him, the roster would feel good. But I feel like that GM alignment isn't going to be there. But yeah, I think this is a pretty good job in terms of some choices. I do think it should be someone you're getting consistency on the offensive end, right? You've already fired an OC for Caleb Williams. You took his pass game coordinator, made him OC, then made him head coach. So you're diluting the amount of attention that Thomas Brown was giving to Caleb Williams throughout the season. I don't want a defensive minded head coach where there I'm going to hire an OC who might look awesome and then get hired away in a year and then I've got another one. I need the offensive minded guy. So number one is Kevin Stefanski. If he becomes available for trade, I'm trading whatever I need to get him. I'm going after Brian Daboll if he does get fired. But in terms of the names I mentioned that are actually out there, that's where you're going for Joe Brady, probably number one. You're going for Todd Monken as a more surly veteran type, like that might be really good. But also reportedly from everything connects really well to his play. I mean, even Georgia players love that guy, so he even connected to college kids and they loved him. But then next step down from Joe Brady and Tom Monken would be Kellen Moore and Drew Petzing, maybe even a Liam Cohen if you really wanted to take a risk, like you said. Maybe it's just about getting the right guy in, even if it's a year or two early. Um, and then you get into Josh McCown, Wes Phillips, Frank Smith, those guys. But I think Joe Brady, Todd Monken, Kellen Moore, those are the guys you're really aiming for if you don't get Ben Johnson.
All right. So I'm going to go on a different course here with the Bears, but it's only because I trust this guy. It's not really anything to do with connecting the dots as I would do on some of these other places. If I'm the Bears, I'm going to go talk to Mike Vrabel. He's one of the very few guys. I've got a three-guy list. It's Flores, Vrabel, and Johnson. Those are the three guys that I really just totally feel comfortable with bringing in, and we're going to compete every week, and we're going to win more than our fair share of games, and we may even do more with it than that. It's those three guys. I mean, I don't have anybody else on my list that I feel that comfortable with. The other guys that have possibilities that I like, but those are the three. And out of the three, I'm going to assume Ben Johnson is not coming to Chicago, mainly because he doesn't want to be in the same division as the Detroit Lions. That would be my line of thought if I were Ben. Okay, I am Ben. I'm a different Ben, but Vrabel's the guy. I trust him to compete, and I trust him if I give him a good enough roster to carry us to a Super Bowl. I think he's got that kind of ceiling. I don't necessarily put him in the top five elite guys, but I'd be bringing in Brian Daboll as OC if Brian Daboll does get fired from the Giants. And I figure Daboll stays for a season or two, hopefully two, enough for us to kind of get our feet on the ground with the offense and Caleb Williams. and then we move on from there. That's what I'm doing if I'm Chicago, just because I trust Vrabel. That's really what it comes down to. And we've had discussions about Vrabel for 2 years now, but that's where I'm at with Chicago and Vrabel.
As a blanket talking point for the audience, because I think the audience can tell that I'm like, if you have a young quarterback, you need to go with an offensive minded guy to make sure that he has that same scheme, same
Yeah.
talking points, same coaching all the way through. For you, and you just have to say this the one time, and then we won't have to say it again. Is Vrabel or Flores just such a stabilizer that as long as the young quarterback clears a certain bar, you're like, okay, they'll bring enough stability to the franchise that the quarterback it will be good in, like Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams isn't like talking about, I don't know, Aiden O'Connell, right, as a young quarterback for the rate. Like
Right.
as long as you give Caleb Williams some semblance of stability, it doesn't even have to be the offense, but just the head coach is the same. His talent is strong enough that he'll be okay. And then how do you apply that to like the incumbent or not the incoming rookie quarterbacks, right? When we get to those teams, we'll talk about it. But like, do you feel the same way that about Caleb Williams and what he needs versus any other young quarterback?
I personally do. If I trust a guy to be my head coach, and basically he's overseeing everything, right? That's his job. I'm not super worried how hands on he is. If he's overseeing everything successfully, and I trust him to do that, and with Vrabel and Flores, I do. I trust them to get us competitive and even over the 500 mark, kind of as a floor.
Hmm.
Then, but I will have a long conversation with them about who's going to be their offensive coordinator.
Hmm.
If they name me some schmuck who just runs a boring offense, then I'm not going to hire them. But if they list somebody whose whose offensive work I've enjoyed, I've liked, I see some creativity along with some good foundation work, then we're fine, totally fine. I'll be totally comfortable, and that's a blanket thing there for me for
So for
sure.
you, it's just if you trust the head coach, you trust him to make the right offensive decisions, even if
Yeah,
you have to do that coaching, hiring for an OC a couple times over the course of the rookie quarterback's contract.
yeah. I would, and I really do trust the stability. It's a Mike. It goes back to the Mike Tomlin thing. If I can't have the guy that say I really want, that I think does have a really high ceiling, then I'll go straight to stability. That's
Hmm.
where I'm going to go with it. Let's do another team here. Let's go ahead and fill out the Giants here. I'll leave the Jets and Saints off for just a second. Let's assume for today's conversation, Brian Dable does actually go, and he may not. He may stay. But if he goes, who are you looking at here for the Giants?
Well, I'm looking for an offensive-minded court. I'm looking for a coordinator who's put together a good offense. So I'm
Yeah,
I'm looking at. I specifically wrote Joe Brady for the Giants. I think for the Bears, I ended up going with Todd Monken for more of a veteran presence because the Bears have been through so much. But for the Giants, I went with Joe Brady, someone a little bit younger. But again, like the pipeline of Bills OC and quarterback guy to Giants head coach, like it worked out well at the beginning with Dayball. So like I guess you are fixing it, though it's not quite broken if you're moving on from Dayball. But I would just try it
yeah.
again with Joe Brady. But it's all the same guys. It's Joe Brady, it's Todd Monken, Kellen Moore, et cetera, et cetera. Because I'm probably drafting a quarterback here in the top three. So I want that guy to come in and provide the good offense for that rookie.
I'm going to say Ben Johnson again, and I've got a reason for doing that.
Right. Yeah.
If I'm the Giants and I let go of Brian Dable, I'm looking to upgrade.
Right.
And the only guy I really see as my true upgrade is Ben Johnson. If I don't think I can get him, I'm keeping Brian Dable because I'm not sure that the rest of the guys we're looking at here are a significant upgrade over Dable. I mean, he's got a good offensive mind already. Who else am I going to get that's going to be a better offensive mind? So, am I going to pull in a defensive guy? Well, okay, maybe a Vrabel. I could see Vrabel working with Shane. I don't like Shane and Brian Flores working together because I'm already a little iffy on Joe Shane as general manager in the first place. A little sketchy on him, and I'm just not sure that Brian Flores would work very well with him. So I've got to be real sure if I'm the Giants here that I'm actually going to upgrade over Brian Dable. If not, let's keep Brian Dable for 2 more seasons. bring in the next new quarterback, let them work together for 2 years, and that's the direction I'm going to take. I really feel like the Giants here need to be very careful that they're not just swapping pieces
Yep.
for Shane's job security, Joe Shane's job security. I don't want to be doing that, and that's why I think you and I are leaning keeping Dable here for the Giants.
Yeah, and you know the Flores thing is interesting. Maybe John Mara, the acting president, CEO, co-owner, I mentioned the Saquon thing earlier, right? Like he wanted Saquon, and Shane was the one that put a price point on him. Maybe he's like, maybe I will bring in Brian Flores just to kind of like eat Joe Shane alive, and then I just move on from Joe Shane. Because like you said, like if Flores senses weakness, like I think he would just strike and just take.
Right.
I'm the captain now, right? I think he would take charge. So maybe Mara wants that. I don't know. But yeah, like to your point, blanket statement again. Ben Johnson's the top for all these guys, and like you want the mold that you have, so you might as well just get the guy who's going to be better for you. But yeah, how long can you wait? How long can you wait around for Ben Johnson if you're going to move on from Dable? Because that's the other thing. It's not like you
Right.
can fire Dayball and talk to Ben Johnson and hire him on the spot, right? You're firing Dayball, and he'll probably get another job before you can officially even hire someone like Ben Johnson because of where he's going to be at in the playoffs. So you're playing a really risky game if you're doing it. We've mentioned Stefanski a couple times. Would you, as the Giants, trade Brian Dayball and one for your first round? I mean, you couldn't trade your first round pick this year to get Stefanski, right? Because that kind of defeats the whole But
I
would you?
wouldn't.
I guess that's the thing. Like, would you do that and then you punt on quarterback for 1 year and then you have Stefanski stabilize the ship and run things next year? Probably not, right? You probably wouldn't do that.
I wouldn't. I like Stefanski. I really do, but I like Dable too.
Just as much.
Stefanski a little better. Yeah. I tell you what else I don't want. I don't want Joe Shane, who's still working his way through what he is as a GM. I don't want him working with a new coordinator guy at head coach. Now I've got a double whammy of inexperience. So if I'm the Giants and I'm keeping Shane, then it's Ben Johnson, it's Mike Vrabel, or it's keep Brian Dable. I don't like a lot of. I see a lot of these other kind of scenarios spiraling out of control pretty quickly here myself.
Yeah. And I meant to say this in the last video, and this will be the last thing I say on the Giants. If you keep Dayball for this year, you need to have the patience and the fortitude to keep him for 2026 as well. You need to give this rookie quarterback
Yes,
2 years of Dayball. If you're gonna do,
right.
if you feel like it's a like prove it or lose it year for Dayball, then you should just move on now and start fresh.
Yeah, which is why I'm still on the keep Brian Dable
Yep,
campaign here for
I am
two
too.
seasons. Yes, absolutely. Okay. We'll hit some of the other teams a little bit more quickly here. Um, the New York Jets. We put them off long enough. Okay. I don't like their owner Woody Johnson. Nothing
Nope.
personal. I just don't like the way he runs the freaking football
Maybe a little
franchise.
personal. That's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Maybe a little bit. The roster's pretty good, even though you could say it's old in some areas. There's a lot to work with here on the roster, but you're going to have a brand new GM. Heaven help us if Aaron Rodgers is still in the building, but I don't think that's
No
going to be the
way.
case.
No way.
Surely he's not still going to be around. New quarterback there. What are they going to do at coach, man?
Ironically, I think you go with the defensive guy here, even after moving on from Robert Saleh, because if I am, let's say, whether it's Woody Johnson or his brother, because Woody Johnson gets appointed an ambassadorship somewhere, and they hire a GM. If I'm this new GM, I'm looking at this roster, I'm looking at this salary cap, and I'm like, there's a lot of guys on defense that are either being paid or about to get paid that I need to figure out if this defense is still good or not. So give me the defensive coach to come in and see if they can get this defense back on track because I would love for that to be my starting point. You're going to have to take a year of your medicine on the quarterback position regardless, right? Like however you move on from
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers, you're going to be paying for that room. And there's some stuff to work out on the offensive end. You haven't had a real offensive coordinator in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, like I don't know how many years it's been, but yeah, I think you just take your medicine on offense, and the most important thing is actually figuring out if this defense is still good. So I am going for Vrabel. I think this is my top Vrabel, like that, like Vrabel's my top candidate here because I think he could handle Woody Johnson, and I think you're kind of giving some power to him, right? New GM, Vrabel is a guy that uh, you can give a little organizational power to, and that would be comfortable. And I think he could take New York, and I think he'd be fine with that. It'd be funny as an AFC East thing. him having to go against the Patriots twice a year, but I think that would be a good fit. And then if you don't get Vrabel, Aaron Glenn from the Lions, who it's probably a shame we waited this long to actually assign him anywhere. But he played here. I think he was drafted by the Jets, and he played there 6, 7 years. So, and then the defense, and I think he could come in and figure out if this is still a good defense or not pretty quickly. So, those are my top two guys for New York. I'm looking at a defensive guy.
So I'm saving. Well, I've already told you where I want Mike Vrabel to go. I want him to go to Chicago. So, but yeah, I could see him here with the Jets. I'm not as high. This is one of the areas in which, even though I trust Vrabel, I just don't want to give him roster control slash
Fair.
influence. I'm just not there yet, man. I want a legit GM working with him and providing him what he needs. I'm just not there yet on Vrabel as the influencer so much. But Aaron Glenn to the Jets makes a lot of sense to me. Aaron Glenn has been working a while. We've seen this Lions defense improve. In some areas, it's been fantastic, and then in some areas, you've seen you can get to it, but you've seen how well they've done without even Aiden Hutchinson roaming around there. I mean, this
Hmm.
defense just kept on moving. And Aaron Glenn, it feels like, man, we've heard this about minority coaches before. We have heard this before, but it feels like he's going to get a job. It just feels like it. Again, we heard the same thing about Eric Bieniemy 3 or 4 years ago. Everybody just knew he was going to get a job. It was a given, and he didn't. But it feels like he's going to get one. And the Jets organization, you mentioned that he played there, man. This will
Yep.
be just a great coming off of the Jets are a mess, man. Coming off of this whole Aaron Rodgers, Robert Saleh, Woody Johnson crap. Aaron Glenn looks like he would bring in a lot of stability, get that defense back on track, like you mentioned, and then hey, let's get him a good quarterback to work with. Maybe it's a bridge quarterback until next year. Let's get him a good quarterback to work with so we can actually win some games next year. And who knows, we might surpass our win totals from the past couple of seasons because it's been miserable. So I like Aaron Glenn to the Jets here. You mentioned Aaron Glenn in another spot too, but I like Aaron Glenn to the Jets here.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know how much Jets fans loved their defense and their corners in the 90s, but look, he went to two Pro Bowls, so I mean maybe they're a little bit of buying back the fan base a little bit too, right? Like, oh, this guy, if they loved him as a player, um, they could feel kind of good about, and again, just figure out, is this defense still good? Should we continue to invest in this? And look, he's been around Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, so he at least knows the archetype of what to look for from, or the blueprint, I should say, from an offensive perspective when he's trying to fill out his staff.
The New Orleans Saints, man, I'm gonna go ahead and throw mine in here, okay? You know my railing on the Saints for the past 2 or 3 years here. I legit want this guy to come and work here because I think he'll do a good job. But even if he doesn't, I just want to see the explosion if it doesn't go well. Okay. So bring in Brian Flores right here to the Saints, man. You talk about a team and a franchise that needs a good kick in the pants, just like Harbaugh's doing over there with the Chargers. Brian Flores would be the guy here. He would get the defense up and running even more than what we've seen, say, over the past 2 to 3 seasons. He would be a perfect guy for that. Need to get him a good coordinator. He could work with Derek Carr, though. I don't think he'd have any trouble working with Derek Carr for another season because they're kind of sort of cap wise tied to him. Be
Hmm.
the same. It'd be the same money to let him go as it would to just keep him for another year. If you want to draft a guy and just tell Derek, hey, man, here's your replacement unless you play better,
Right.
that's fine too. Um, Brian Flores, I feel like, would get this team, especially in this division, competing quick and would get them a good kick in the seat of the pants, which is what they need. And listen, if it blows up after a couple of years and they finally start to move off of some of this cap ridiculousness that they've been stuck to, and some of this kind of, I don't know what you call it. It's almost like Cowboys Bayou style, where they've got all these heavy cap burdens that they're dealing with, and they just kind of had this long-standing history of keeping these guys in the front office for a very long time, and it's just kind of stuck this way in mediocrity. Maybe Brian Flores is the guy to come in and just blow this thing up. But even if not, I do trust Brian Flores to do a good job. So Flores to the Saints here is what I would want to see.
That is a lot of fun, especially if they're gonna run it back this year, right? Because there are pieces on both sides of the ball, that maybe you just kind of need a new fire, and Brian Flores would certainly bring that. I actually wrote Aaron Glenn for here because, oh, by the way, he also has a connection to the Saints. He played for the Saints for a little bit as well, but coached under Sean Payton. He was with the Saints for several years as a coach. So part of that Sean Payton, Dan Campbell tree. So him coming back to the Saints would make some sense too if they want to do the Saints thing and just have the stability, right? Because he was literally here with Mickey Loomis, with this ownership
Right.
group, like with
Right.
some of these players were on the team when he was here. Um, so you would get kind of that aspect of it too, and then it would just be a matter of do they want to go defense or do they want to go offense? Because if they wanted to go offense, Joe Brady was also here at one point.
Right.
He was under Sean
Right.
Payton before going to LSU, and then you could really have that connection, and you have a lot financially tied to this offense, as you were mentioning with Carr. Could Joe Brady be your like last stick effort to try and make this offense work, as it is? So, and you have the Alvin Kamara comparison to James Cook, right, as a receiving back who can also run. So, I think there'd be some ties there, and yeah, it just is that stability. Like, is Mickey Loomis going to be the like everyday active GM still? Or are they going to do something else with? And then you just get into the whole timeline of what is going to happen, which makes the Saints I do think a less desirable job because you don't know
Yeah.
when the ticking timer is going to go off and if you're going to be stuck holding it at the end, right? Is this team going to reset now? Is this team going to reset in 2 years? And then you have to be part of a rebuild, which coaches do not come out on the other side of. Or is this your team for 4 or 5 years, at least at like the construction of it, and you're gonna get to like slowly usher in a new quarterback, a new defensive line, a new blah blah blah. Are you gonna be able to be a part of that? Or are you gonna coach here for 2 years and they're like, yeah, we gotta blow everything up. So cut all the players, we'll fire you after a year. Mickey Loomis is gonna get a 2% ownership stake and just be comfy with his feet up somewhere, and we'll get a new GM who will hire your replacement. Like I don't know if this is the place I want to go, which is why it feels like someone they already know and have a relationship with. It feels like where they're going to end up.
It's a great point you make, and let's be real clear here. And by the way, I haven't mentioned Joe Brady yet. You've mentioned him several times. If I were going to put Joe Brady somewhere, it would be here to the Saints. And again, they're picking from a lower group here. They're not going to get their top pick because they're not the most desirable spot. And if I'm Brian Flores, I don't go to New Orleans and coach. Even though if I'm the Saints and if I'm
Right.
me, Flores would do a good job there. Hey, right now I'm a defensive genius up here in Minnesota.
Hmm.
I can keep doing that for a while. My family's happy here. I'm happy here. I've got a good offensive support staff to work with here. And I've got a pretty good resume from Miami. Why would I want to go down to New Orleans and blemish
Yeah.
that? If I'm Flores, I don't go down to the Saints because of exactly what you just said. It's not a great destination spot right now until they start still, I'm not a big fan of blowing things up, but the Saints thing needs to slowly reform itself. It needs to not be what it is anymore. Uh, the Raiders. Let's assume Antonio Pierce is out the door, which is a very good chance here. I already mentioned in the last show that I would love Ben Johnson here. I feel like there's several names that could fit here, though. Actually, where are you at on the Raiders?
So yeah, Ben Johnson, obviously, there's obviously the Mike Vrabel connection with Tom Brady. Do they want to try and make this Patriots West again? I mean, they tried that with Josh McDaniels not too long ago, and that
Who
didn't work.
knows?
But maybe you just had the wrong pieces of that, right? Josh McDaniels is not the biggest name or the most reliable name from that era of the Patriots. So maybe getting a little Tom Brady, Mike Vrabel connection would work well here. He's also somebody that I'm sure Dion would be a huge proponent of. If we were gonna play Draft War Room miniseries Colorado edition again. Um, I like when I actually force myself to write a name to every team and just pick one. I actually just wrote Brian Daboll here. So assuming that he's not available or Stefanski isn't available either. Again, I just think you need to get a guy you're going to trust to be here and be in charge of the offense for 3, 4 years at least to usher in this rookie quarterback you're about to have. So unfortunately, you very quickly would get to the list of like Liam Cohen and Kellen Moore and Drew Petzing, like unproven guys stepping into Vegas, which isn't great. Because yeah, of those six inner circle guys, only two of them were offensive minded for me, and then it's rough after that. And in theory, as the Raiders, you have a great position, right? Because you have the first, you're well, I shouldn't say you have the first overall pick. At this point, you have the first overall pick. But you're gonna get a chance at one of the top quarterbacks in this class. But unfortunately, it's not the best quarterback class. So how much does that really mean to a coach this year? Meanwhile, Max Crosby's season is now officially over with a foot injury. So you're wondering how that's going to impact next year. Players have been wanting to leave this team this season with Devontae Adams being traded. So like there's a lot up in the air. And again, the GM situation, Tom Telesco, is he sticking around or not? Um, this might end up being a situation where you're going to have to dig into that second tier of offensive guys, and that does not always work out when it's not going to be the strongest quarterback to come in.
See, I'm not trying to knock the Raiders here. I actually think it's a decent job. I think there are worse jobs, but you're 100% right. They're not, if they can't get Ben Johnson, and if I'm the Raiders, I throw tons of money and promises at Ben Johnson. Man, you can pick you get already get to pick all your defensive and offensive guys, but you get to pick the quarterback. We'll draft the quarterback you want to work with. Blah blah blah. Here's a couple of Brinks trucks coming to your house, et cetera, et cetera. If I can't get him though, I think you're right. They are going to be looking at second tier guys. It's just not a spot where it feels like a lot of people want to go to, and it's not like it's a terrible spot, but it's just the vibes around the Raiders place for a while now haven't been, hey, this is the place to go to, So I'm gonna do everything I can to get Ben Johnson here. I would be very desperate if I were the Raiders.
A couple weeks ago, you were on my podcast, the Simon and Friends podcast. We did our War Room mini series. We talked about, hey, being the quarterback for the Raiders is good because they stuck with, Derek Carr for a really long time, so they'll stick with you. Coach is not so much, man. I mean, who was the last coach that lasted more than 3 seasons? Gruden's 2.0 was out in 3.5 seasons, but that was because of his scandal. So maybe he would have stuck around longer. But McDaniels for a year and a half. We're talking about Pierce for a year and a half. Jack Del Rio had 3 years. Dennis Allen had 3 years. You got to go back to the last time Gruden was there in the early 2000s, where he was there for 4 years, and then they traded him to the Bucks, and he won a Super Bowl against them. So the coaching stability in the Raiders is not great. But if you are Ben Johnson, if this is the team that says, hey, we'll fire Tom Telesco and we'll bring, I forget the Lions assistant GM's name, but we'll bring him as our GM. You guys come
Right,
together and
right.
you remake what happened to Detroit with, let's say, the first overall pick, then yeah, you're cooking. So I think if I didn't quite say this with some of the other Ben Johnson conversations, but if he gets one place to say you can bring your assistant GM from Detroit here with you, then that might be all he needs to make something happen.
Yeah, agreed. The Raiders feel a lot like the Panthers last year, where they're basically just going to view the crap out of everybody that they can. If they can't get Ben Johnson, they're going to interview just literally everybody, and then try to make a good decision on who they think is going to be there. Let's hit the Dallas Cowboys, man. I'm gonna go ahead and say it because it's you know what, I'm gonna let you say it and see if you say what I think you were gonna say. If you're not, then I'll say it later. But to go ahead and talk about the Dallas Cowboys. If McCarthy's gone, where do they turn?
I know you won't like this one. It's not the one I sent you before, which I suspected was the one you were hoping it was. I've come off of that. I actually wrote Brian Flores here, hilariously enough, because I don't know. I think there's some weird world where he and Jerry Jones actually like love each other. Because think about why Brian Flores and the ownership in Miami blew up, right? It's because they wanted him to lose. Jerry Jones doesn't want to lose, man. That dude is every bit as competitive as anybody out here, and that's part of it. Like he just wants to win so bad. And I think these two would just be like crazy lunatics trying to win games again. And he would be the splashy move. Is Jerry Jones going to hire Drew Petzing, the
No,
offensive coordinator from Arizona that nobody knows, but he designs a good run game? Hell no, that's not going to happen. He's going to get one of these big names. So obviously Mike Vrabel is going to be at the top of the list. Ben Johnson's going to be at the top of the list. Maybe even Robert Saleh is going to be at the top of the list, but Saleh and Johnson aren't going here based on what they're going to value, right? What they're going to be looking for. So Vrabel's probably at the top, but right after maybe Jones is the guy that trades 2 picks for Stefanski, right? I could see that happening, but if Stefanski's staying put, I put Flores here, man, just because sparks will fly, and I think that's what Jerry Jones wants. And Brian
I
Flores,
can't.
like think about it, like they have a quiet personnel department guy, Will McLeod, I think is his name, um, who does all the drafting, puts the team, but like he's fine being in the background because Jerry Jones pays him to be in the background. So really, Brian Flores just answering to the one guy, Jerry Jones, and those two nutcases might just work out, might be just crazy enough to work.
Brian Flores would be great for Dallas. Though that Dallas run defense needs help. So does the whole defense. I can't do it to Brian Flores, man. I like him too much. I got too much respect. I just can't
Job
sit. I know I sent
stability.
him. I
Jerry
know,
Jones. Jerry
and I
Jones
know I
keeps
sent him
coaches
to the
forever.
Saints, but I can't do it. I can't send Brian Flores here. I'm going to quote the name that you put down on the pre-production notes. That is Pete Carroll. You mentioned it. I don't know what Pete Carroll's doing these days. I don't know if he really wants to get back into the full-time head coaching game or not. But if he does, I'm sure he's got the energy, and I think the energy would be great there in Dallas with him coming in, man, just loving everybody, even soothing down Micah Parsons, man. I mean, it would just be great. I would love to see Pete Carroll end his career going out with the Dallas Cowboys as Jerry Jones ends his career as the owner of Dallas Cowboys whenever that comes to an end. I would enjoy that. I don't want to see Brian Flores going down there to Dallas, man. Goodness gracious. I can't do that to Brian, man. But the Vibes would be happy with Pete Carroll there. It would be a lot of fun, man. You
I don't
sold me
think
on it.
Pete Carroll would ever. I wrote that down and then I forgot about it. And when you said I really liked one of your pairings, I was like, crap, it's
That
Pete
was
Carroll.
it.
Carroll would never do that. Carroll's coming out of semi-retirement to do what Jerry Jones tells him to do? Absolutely not. So I was hearing this on, I think Carroll, I forget if he wrote about this in a book or he said it in some interview, but I was hearing somebody talk about this recently. And when Carroll got fired from the Jets, he said the number one thing that happened was too many people all trying to make decisions and tell him what to do. General manager, other coaches, ownership. So he goes to USC and he says, if I go back to the NFL, I'm never letting that happen again. He essentially did what Belichick did with UNC, where he wrote like this whole binder of like, this is like my rule book. This is our Bible. Like, if you want me, this is what's happening. I'm in charge. I'm picking the GM. I'm making roster decisions, yada, yada, yada. You got to get out of my way. That's not happening in Dallas, man. It's not
No, it's
happening.
not.
Can you? I don't know who would be more offended, Jerry Jones being handed that binder, or Pete Carroll because Jerry Jones told him, "Yeah, you can come work for me, and I'm in charge of." Like that's just there ain't no way. It would be fun. Everything that you said about the roster and why it makes sense would be great. Pete Carroll will never go work for Jerry Jones.
All you had to do was set it on the ground, man, and I picked it up instantly. The very second I saw it, I was like, "Yes, I want
Just
that. I'm good with that. Yes,
you're the cat under the chair, and I put
yes,
the little
that
mouse
was it,
fetching
man."
toy there, and you just kind of like grabbed it with your hand and brought it underneath. Yeah, it's not happening. It's not happening. I wish
let's
I wish
play.
there was a place I could stick Pete Carroll, but I don't see it this year.
Let's play a game real quick, and this will end us up right here. We got 7 teams. We've had conversations about everything and everybody here, but I'm gonna let you make the final decision. We'll start with one team. You tell me who's going there, and we'll keep eliminating teams and guys until all 7 spots are filled. Okay.
All right.
I'm gonna pick the Jaguars first. Let's say that coaching job gets filled up first. Who's going there?
Do I get to fire Trent Baalke?
Yes, you do.
Ben Johnson?
All right, Ben Johnson's there. Trent Baalke is out. Let's go from there straight to the Bears. I feel like the Bears have a good chance of getting a decent head coach here.
Are the Giants is one of our teams, right? So Brian Daboll's available.
Yes, let's fire Dable just for this
Okay.
conversation.
In going in this order, then getting to pick in this order, the Bears get Brian Daboll.
Brian Dable moving over to Chicago to work with Caleb Williams. Let's go ahead and move from there to the Giants then, because I do feel like the Joe Shane thing notwithstanding, to me, the Giants are still a decent place to go to.
If I'm the Giants and I'm getting rid of Brian Daboll, I'm going to Joe Brady.
Joe Brady heading to the Giants to work with their new quarterback and with Joe Shane. Moving right along here, I'm gonna say the Cowboys till last. I think let's go ahead and do the Jets here because the Jets strike me as a team that probably wouldn't wait a super long time to fill that spot. So Dable's gone, Ben Johnson's gone, Joe Brady's gone. Who did the Jets get in that case?
I am going to take Mike Vrabel here.
Mike Vrabel coming in right here to the Jets. I like Vrabel in a lot of spots. He seems to me like one of the safest choices that really any of these teams could make. So I'm okay with that one. From there, let's move on over. You take your pick. Raiders and Saints. Who feels it first, and which guy goes to that franchise?
I think the Saints will nab up somebody they know for the comfort, and I think they get Aaron Glenn.
Aaron Glenn going to the Saints. I'm actually okay with that one too. You never know until you give a guy a chance. Glenn should get a chance somewhere. Let's go to the Raiders. We talked about them having having a lot of choices, but not top choices. Flores still on the board here. You going there? Or you going somewhere else?
As much as I want to stick Flores in Dallas, I wonder if Tom Brady can get in Flores' ear a little bit.
Hmm.
Flores was there with the Patriots while Brady was there. Obviously, I didn't really think about that earlier. As much as I want an offensive-minded person there, if I'm the Raiders and I get my pick between Flores and I have Brady trying to convince him, let's put Flores with the Raiders.
I'm okay with Flores to the Raiders as well, and that leaves us with the Cowboys. Mike McCarthy's out of there. Who they bringing in, man?
Really boxed myself in here with Dallas. Um, let's give me Todd Monken. Give me Todd
Todd
Monken.
Monken. All right.
I put him on my list of guys that when I wrote down my seven and I was doing different orders, I gave him a job. I mentioned Bruce Arians earlier, right? Could this be Bruce Arians 2.0? Monken's kind of that vibe. And maybe the splash for Jones is the personality of Monken. He'll get up and say something old and surly to the media, and Jerry Jones will like that. Um, and then what he did in Baltimore the last couple of years, especially if maybe Lamar wins an MVP this season with him at OC, maybe that's enough splash for Jerry Jones.
We've talked about a lot. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll talk about it again here probably in a couple of months once we've got some more clarity on it and talk about what we've liked, what we're still not sure about, because again, some of these guys, you don't need to give them a chance. This is the Box Score Network. Simon, tell the audience a little bit about what else they can find with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Make sure you like this video. Ben and I are trying to put a little bit more content on here. Everybody else is going to as well. But we have our weekly preview show for the NFL slate. So make sure you check that out every Sunday morning before the games kick off. Make sure you check out all of our audio podcasts as well. Ben on Odds On Favorite, me on the Simon and Friends podcast. We have the Tricky Takes podcast and Two Peas on a Pod, and Because CONCACAF as well for your soccer updates. And also check out Ben's YouTube show if you're a YouTube person. Pro Football Plus on Sports and Money KC over there on YouTube as well. So make sure you check all of those out, everything at Box Score Network. And yeah, we'll be back with more additional content outside the preview show on this channel here fairly soon. So make sure you keep an eye out.
That's why Simon does that and not me, because I can't even remember the name of all the shows, much less say them correctly in a row like that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Simon, I've enjoyed it. We'll have a great week. Enjoy your football. See you next time here on the Box Score Network.